like to introduce you to Bernard Kritzer. Kritzer. I hope I pronounced your name right, Bernie. Of National Capital Trains. He's the owner of the company. Bernie and I have talked several times, and I've really been impressed. Bernie's an Nscaler, knows an awful lot about the hobby and about the Nscale market. And I think you're going to enjoy hearing from him. Bernie, thank you so much. And I apologize for probably mispronouncing your name.
Hi, welcome everybody. I want to begin by thanking you, Jim, for the opportunity to speak to your group. I am very impressed and have great respect for some of the outstanding modeling that I've been listening to for the past hour, I should say. So what I'd like to do is talk to you about the Nscale world. I'm not going to call myself a craftsman. I'm far from a craftsman, but I've been a modeler for over 60 years. And I have been in business probably with National Capital Trains for over 30 years. And throughout that journey, we kind of settled on Nscale after a long period of trying a number of the other scales, all of which are quite good. But the Nscale fit not only our personal modeling needs, but also the interest of a large number of people living in our markets. So what I want to do is start, we're basically about 15, 16 months past the COVID. And I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into the Nscale and some of the products and look at our operating display layout. I wanted to talk just a little bit about what is happening. And these issues are not just hold for Nscale, but I call them four singularities that are applying across the board to all scales. And they involve the four elements that make up our hobby and our industry. They start with you and me as the model railroaders. They move over to myself as a dealer. They then go to manufacturers and importers, names like Broadway Limited, Lionel, Atlas, Kato, all companies that have limited to almost no production in the US, but design things and have them produced abroad and are imported and distributed within the United States. And the last part of the equation are the foreign manufacturers who make these parts. So when you look at the entire thing, it's a set of equations where if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, there has to be some symmetry at all times between those elements of the equation. When you don't have symmetry, either you have too many people who are losing interest in the hobby, or there's a number of shops going out of business, or in some cases you can't get product. In other cases, manufacturers have found that there's other opportunity costs to produce products in their home countries, which to some extent is Japan, but has largely moved to China, offshore, and will probably evolve and move in a few other places very soon. Well, I should add, there is some market in Korea as well. So what are some of the issues that we're facing today? And again, this is going to be across the entire spectrum. Well, the first one I think is supply shortages. Everywhere I look, I know every day I'm in a situation where we sell a lot, but I wind up having to turn away almost as much business as our sales because we're all out of product. There was a great, backlog during COVID when many of the plants around the world shut down. We've worked off all of our inventory, and then, we're just waiting as new product comes in. Now, thankfully, in the last couple of months, I've seen the resumption of that pipeline, not only in to the United States, but I've seen it in terms of supplies, coming to Europe and to other, areas. And I think the thing you've got to remember about this is not just a US-centric or Japanese-centric model railroad. It's a world market. You have a large community in Western Europe. You have a growing community in Eastern Europe and some activity actually in the European part of Russia. And last but not least, you have a growing market not only in Taiwan and Asia, but now starting to grow in China. So that's the first of the issues we're all facing. The second issue has to do with the transportation infrastructure. I never thought that it would be more difficult and timely to move an item out of the US West Coast custom zones and harbors and rail to the distribution points in the United States, largely in the East and in the West, and it would take a longer time than it would to sail that item from Asia to the US West Coast. But in some instances, we've had a large delays. Now they're starting to clear up now because there's more containers available, more ships are available, activity is beginning to pick up. The third thing we're all seeing across the board, and I see it almost every day, is price inflation. Everywhere, raw materials seem to be going up in price, be it lumber, be it petroleum feedstocks in the form of polystyrene, to make the plastics that go into many of our models, be it the metal, the white metal that goes into building trucks and other products. It's going up. And of course, wages are growing up in the foreign markets. So you now see a situation where in some of the Asian countries, there are not that many people who are coming from the countryside to the city. The people already in the city are finding that they can make more money building memory circuits or doing other type of skilled work than working on model trains. So in some instances, a number of the suppliers will basically be raising their price because it's their only way to retain labor. Okay, the last thing that we see in all of this going on is product innovation. And that just keeps coming. I know in Nscale, I can talk to you about body style. A company like Microtrains, who makes some of the outstanding freight cars, if not the most outstanding, they have about 45 body styles of freight cars and a few passenger cars. We have laser graphics applied. Some of the cars that come out now are not only beautifully painted and lettered, but they can be weathered or they can be graffitied. And so you see a lot of different custom work coming out from manufacturers in that regard. We have electronics is really improved. And one of the biggest things I see in Nscale is we move now to a large amount of digital, and we're starting to move into sound. So when I started getting involved in Nscale about 20 years ago, 1-2% of what we had, somebody thought about digital. Today, we look at sales for the week, or we wind up doing a large show, and about 2/3 of what we sell is sound-based and digital-based. In fact, in some product lines, but I can tell you that pretty much everything we order is digital and sound. So having said that, where is this taking us as a future for all of us? Well, the issue is going to be, how do you manage all of this? How do you manage supply shortages, transportation, price inflation, new product, and how do you keep the four elements of the equation, or the four horsemen of the happy, meaning the model railroader, the dealer, the manufacturer, and the foreign supplier? So one of the first things you're going to see is we're going to all move forward steadily. We're not going to see, to avoid boom and bust, we're not going to see any particular supplier flood the market with product at this point. That would do no good for anyone, because a lot of dealers would have products sitting. A lot of dealers would have a problem paying for the large amount. And you, of course, the consumers, would have a hard time absorbing it all at once. The new business models we're going to look at are going to be virtual activities such as this, a variety of other virtual shows that I do and will continue to do. At some point, we are going to have some of our retail hours are going to be essentially virtual hours, where we will be available and you'll be able to reach us on Zoom and you can go through things. Another trend that we've adopted with our website has been, we can't take pictures of everything. We have linkages, obviously, to all of you, all of the manufacturers. However, in some instances, particularly with our brass and Nscale and HO, the customer wants to see something, it's a very expensive piece. And our rule of that service is, contact us, you'll get a number of photos, and you can get a live video of the running and operation. We will continue to do that. We will specialize in things. And in Nscale, not only we specialize in the American, but we'll talk about it a little bit later, we carry a lot of foreign trains, because model railroading is an international hobby, as I noted earlier, and many of the people that our customers, have ridden these trains all over the world. So let's talk a little bit about Nscale. Nscale, started out a number of years ago, probably 50 to 60 years ago, and it largely started out in Japan. The initial Japanese activities, essentially, they looked at the limited space they had. And to us, a 4x8 table would be, something Not a big deal, no big deal. In Japan, there were not room for 4x8 tables unless you had a situation in your apartment, which had very high rent in places like Tokyo or the other major cities, where you could fold a table up into the wall the way you could fold a bed into the wall. So what happened was many of the high schools started to form clubs. And so you had a wide range of clubs that developed in Japan as the hobby grew up, both in HO and in Nscale. The second thing you had was the advent of modules. That was much more an American situation where, you know, a number of people who were limited in space and living in the Washington, D.C. area with a high retail prices for housing, which continue to go up. We have a large amount of modules. Our Northern Virginia Nscale trackers are probably one of the largest Nscale modular groups in the country. And I've been to shows with them where they've invited other Nscale module groups from around the country. And sometimes they've had as many as 300 2x4 foot modules plugged together. And each time they have a competition as to, can we run the longest train of all time? And lastly, for some who do not have the space, they use Nscale, but they use a thing called T-Track, where they just have a small table, the cast resin table, and they put 1x1 modules on those tables, and they operate that way. So with that, I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to show you our operational display. You get an idea of what we have. Okay, it's going to take me a second, you know, to start it up. Can you hold this? So they can stand up and hold it. All right, we'll start up one of the trains. Let them see it. Just bear with us for a second. There. Go down. So what we are doing here is this is our display layout we run at shows, and to test everything, we run up to 6 trains at any one time. Now, one of our trains is running, the outside train, the Super Chief, is running in analog, and everything else will be running in DCC. I'll call up a couple of more trains. Can most of you see the operation?
I see a thumb.
Okay. How about now? Can you see? Oh, can you see the trains running?
Yes.
Okay. Let me stay with this and show you a couple. We have 6 trains that can run. It's an area 3.5 by 7. We run 6 trains as well as tram. You know, we can run around. So see if I can get a tram going. So that's an example of some of the operation. And I'm sorry for the technical, you know, issues here. So let me come back over here and talk about a few of the other products. Yeah. Some people talk. Can you guys see the Lupa track?
No. Yeah, now I can.
Okay. 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 I can't, it's not shifting. I'm sorry, normally I can reverse the screen and we're having a technical problem here on the iPad, if you'll bear with me.
We were seeing the Lupa track.
Okay, let me get back to this. Okay, everybody talks about getting into Nscale. Is that clear now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, what I have here is a loop. This is an oval. It's approximately 1 foot wide. The tracks are 6 radius, and that's a small, you know, high performance little tram that's running. That particular layout takes a few minutes to put together and has been assembled by my 7-year-old granddaughter and my 4-year-old grandson. So it gives you an idea that it's fairly easy to get involved in Nscale. Now, next to it is what we call a train in the box. That is a very prototypical train. Okay, that's the Virginia Railway Transit. And that's a train that runs from the suburbs in Northern Virginia to Washington, D.C. Now, that train in the box has an engine, an F40PH there. It has 3 cars, and it runs, and it contains track and a power pack. Now,
I need to, Bernard, you actually need to pan it down just a little bit.
How's that?
A little farther.
There?
There we go.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Now, next to it, we have a foreign train that I'm going to put into place. That is the Dr. Yellow. Dr. Yellow is the inspection train for the Shinkansen Nozomi. And that train is actually equipped to run with digital, and it can be expanded to a 7 to 11 car train. Then also there's a Chicago Metro, and this is the Shinkansen Nozomi. Now, having been through that, here's an example of an Nscale diesel, a modern diesel in Japanese, a double ender. That's their version. And I wanted to show you one of the greatest innovations that's come in a long time. This is the new car from Rapido. This is the Canadian. It's a totally prototypical Canadian passenger car. It's a coffee Vista dump, and it's set in the Via scheme. And if you look, that's the underbody detail. You know, our previous.
You also, Bernard, you need to move it over just a little bit. There you go.
Okay. Our previous speaker talked about underbody detail. Well, the Rapido people, you know, I think did a tremendous job in producing it. They produce also a 10-car train as well. Now let me show you. This is a foreign train. This is a foreign, you know, Japanese train that runs in the Kyoto area. It's equipped with digital, and it runs very smoothly. It takes a 9-inch or an 11-inch radius.
Can you pull it back a little bit, Bernard?
How's that now?
Yeah, that'll work. Thank you.
Okay. And let me show you one more thing, if I can get it going here. This is an example of the cars in the Canadian set. They're 10-car, they're prototypical. So I'm going to turn it back to myself now. And I apologize for the technical delay. You know, obviously the next time that we do this, we'll have a much more improved, you know, technical presentation. Anyhow,
well, technology is fantastic until it doesn't work right.
Okay, what doesn't work?
I said the technology is fantastic until it doesn't work right.
Yeah, that's correct. So we have a whole variety of people that are participate in Nscale, and they range from some really outstanding modelers to a lot of people who are downsizing and just getting into something as they move to retirement homes, and they have room for, you know, a small train. We have a lot of kids, young kids getting in, and we've seen the advent of a lot of clubs, particularly these new T-Track modules, which instead of your traditional 2x4 module is essentially a 1x1 module. And you can buy from Costco one of those resin tables, 3 or 4 of those resin tables, and then have a bunch of straight and curved modules and have your entire operation, you know, in a small area. So space is not at a premium. Technology is getting better. I would tell you that there is an increased demand at the upper end, and just because it's small, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be cheaper. In some cases, it, you know, continues to go up. A 10-car Rapido Canadian set with lights and interior detail and everything, you know, they run between $600 and $700. So it's not cheap, and that's before you get into, you know, locomotives that have digital sound and other activities. I talked just a little bit about a number of the manufacturers. They're all quite outstanding. And I'm just going to go in no particular order that would imply a preference. Atlas has been around for a long time. They make some outstanding products. both in locomotives, in freight cars, and an Nscale track. And they cover, all the ranges from the very early steam diesel era all the way up until the modern era. Broadway Limited is one of the new entries, but extraordinarily dynamic in that many of their locomotives feature sound in DCC, and they're up to, I think, Proto 4 sound now is the newest thing they're advertising. And they've done some great jobs. One that we were particularly impressed with was the Pennsylvania Mountain, and we had that ready to show before the advent of some of the technical problems here today. Of course, Kato, everyone knows. They're legendary with their track, the performance, a number of their diesels. And I can tell you in that regard, we've had some of their diesels, we've run them 300-400 hours at shows and, at home layouts. And other than lubrication, maintenance, and occasionally replacing a motor, we've had no problems there. Rapido is probably the latest entry into the market. For a while there, they focused primarily on Canadian models, and they focused primarily on HO. Now they're getting much more involved in Nscale, and they do a lot of work, I know, in Britain in OO, which is very close to HO, not quite, quite HO. It's just a little bigger than HO. And in addition, they're starting to do, more American, prototype models, including buses, freight cars, etc. And who else is there? Intermountain, a firm in Denver, does a lot of product and development. Now, I hope, in going through all of this, and of course, I'm sorry, one more, Bachmann, which has been around for a long time and produces some pretty good products. For those of you who like steam, Pennsylvania Railroad, they did a beautiful K4. For the New York Central, they did a beautiful J3A Hudson with sound, per se. And then if you shift to freight and passenger cars, all the companies that I've talked about have done, really outstanding jobs. And there's a wide variety of track that's available, in all areas. What I think I'd like to do, because I know we've had some technical problems today, and you guys have run over time. I'll allow a little bit of time now for questions. And anybody who needs to reach me, you can always get me at www.nationalcapitaltrains.com or nctrains99@gmail.com. And I know Jim also has a copy, our address and contacts, you can reach us. And if you do, we can give you more information about us, as well as a number of, PowerPoint slide presentations and other activities. So with that, let me throw it open to some questions.
Anybody have any questions for Bernie?
Yeah, I have a question. Bernie, are you you don't have a brick and mortar store then, obviously?
No, there are no brick and mortar stores. Particularly where we lived in Washington, D.C., there were never really any hobby shops per se. Yet a number of people I know have succeeded in having, by going to shows or doing internet sales. And so essentially what we do is we do shows, we do internet sales, and we have a little bit of time each week where people can come over. They can arrange an appointment and come over as long as they have a mask. And we can accommodate up to 3 people at a time now. And we'll probably be accommodating, or more people in the future as the COVID issue diminishes in, seriousness.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I got a question about you're saying that the popularity of Nscale. What is there any reason why you didn't go Zscale?
Zscale is starting to catch on now. When I started this a number of years ago, there was very little in Zscale. And so I focused I did a lot of HO, but then I moved down to Nscale. And with the activities in our area, we just found a comfort zone, and then the customers came. But Z is quite good now.
Bernie, I wonder if you could talk about what I refer to as the heart and soul of the hobby. And that's the small guy, the small manufacturer. the guy that has an idea for a kit or a product and make 3D printed to start with or whatever. He starts his company and he starts providing product. Are those people coming into the Nscale market?
Yeah, you have some innovation in that market. Hang on. In fact, I'm going to get the name, one of the companies right now. I can show you who's really does terrific stuff. And I just need to get a copy of one of his cars. Okay. And this is called Wheels of Time. His name is Matthew. He's out on the West Coast. He started building Harriman cars and he moved into in Nscale, a whole series of Harriman passenger cars and baggage cars. And he also then moved on to doing stuff in HO, as well as bulldozer kits, lumber loads. And he's innovated and done a lot of things. I think part of the slowdown was when he did a lot of that innovation, he wound up getting caught when the Chinese manufacturer shut down due to COVID or insolvency. Another who started small and has grown up a lot is Intermountain. And of course, they're now basically getting back online after all the issues. Trainworks is another relatively small manufacturer. And many of these guys, they did incredible design work. They were very good as modelers, but then in order to achieve a low cost, given the cost of their tooling, they wound up having to go abroad and they saw their costs go up and they saw different companies go in and out of business. And let me tell you, when you're 10,000 miles away and you have your proprietary data, you can talk about lawsuits, but it's not going to work. You might win a suit, but how are you going to go 10,000 miles in another language, get your tooling out of that, make sure your tooling, it still works, take your tooling somewhere else, have somebody do prototype runs, and then scale up again. That's a massive, massive thing. So I take my hat off to those people. And of course, the first and foremost was Cliff Grant and his company before they retired. Another couple of guys bought them out in Denver, and they have that car thing, and they have the old San Juan models. So they've done good. And there's a variety of other small guys in Nscale. I think Rapido, he started out small. He's grown, quite large, from just doing a few projects in Nscale. And he wound up now probably having a partnership in 3 or 4 of factories in China. And he's been extremely successful. And I think the key for a number of them has been how successful you can be in working with your foreign partner. And he's been among the most successful, and as have some of the German companies. And again, it's a huge model railroad world. We're just one piece. And when I think sometimes of the big companies, the Katos, the Tomixes, Tomix just produces for the Japanese market, and he produces toys under Tomy, things such as Thomas the Tank. Kato produces for the world, but probably 75-80% of his work is for the Japanese market, because he's Avis and the other guy is Hertz, and they're all trying to keep up, as well as all of the small people there. No, the innovation will continue now. It's just, it's going to have to take place with these new business models, and people are going to have to raise capital, and they're going to have to find a way, to maintain a tie to a foreign manufacturer and all the changes that, come with that. I mean, I personally think the future is bright. It's just we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and we're going to have to do it. And perhaps someday there'll be firms that follow the lead of Microtrains, who's now probably one of the last and most outstanding of the U.S. manufacturers. And I'll tell you, any of his cars are second to none.
Bernie, what should the modeler like me expect in the next 5 years?
It's going to take that much time for things to settle down, but you should expect lots of innovation, lots more electronics. You're going to have the application of electronics. And in a way, it's ironic because the first companies that had the electronics were American Flyer and Lionel in the 40s and 50s, and they had all that animation. Today, you're going to have a much more realistic animation made by a much better technology product that's much more highly accurate and reliable. You're going to have that. You're going to have far more weather cars and draft cars. You'll see less and less, I think, undecorated stuff. You'll come to a point where digital or some form of digital and or sound will be the basic things, and analog will start, going away. You have a pretty good amount of track. You'll see, I think, more prototypical couplers, better railroad trucks. And this example I showed you of the Rapido passenger car is, to me, one of the most outstanding things you can do. I mean, that's incredible detail for 1/160th. I mean, I sold in 30 years, I've sold hundreds of passenger car sets. I've sold probably 40 or 50 in brass, and there's no detail that rivals it. Now, some of the Kato name trends, like Santa Fe Super Chief, the El Capitan, they rival it. You're going to see more of those. You're going to see things tailored, specific, name trains. Unfortunately, since the tooling cost per name train, let's say you wanted to build a 1947 Empire builder, you wanted to use E7s, and you had a tool for 8 to 9 cars. Well, that might use up all the tooling available in a particular company's budget for a year and a half. So they're going to put out one run. In that one run, they're basically going to be lucky to break even. And they want to make some profit, so they're going to have to do another run. So before they can begin manufacturing, another new prototype. Somebody will say, well, let's shift to North Coast, or let's, shift to the Sioux Railroad. They can't until they get all of that stuff done. I mean, at the end of the day, folks, it's still a business, and we have to do it. But I think it's a very rosy future if everybody is willing to continue. And these events, such as what you're having, are ways to enhance that dialogue. I'm doing live events, with other groups as well, doing virtual shows. And the more that we do of this, the more people get out. You're going to see a broader based hobby. You're going to see a lot of individuals who just get into specialization, such as we're doing, because nobody's going to be able to afford to have a brick and mortar shop. I mean, the few places that had brick and mortar shops, if they haven't closed up, they're probably closed, because they look at how much money they're making by selling on the internet versus what they're making with their fixed costs in a hobby shop. And quite frankly, unless you're talking about the holiday season, or some new item has come out, or you're have opening hours because there's a huge train show near you, what could it be? 5, 7%, 10% of your sales would be retail, and 90% of your sales at a much lower fixed cost and operating cost is going to be the other way. So it's going to be full of challenges. It's going to be full of adjustments. I mean, I often get the question, well, are you scared because so-and-so is buying as a distributor and they can undercut you? Not particularly. I used to think about it. Now I know that as long as we can buy product and we can provide the services, as you see this test railroad before us, we take to every show. So a customer knows when they buy something, they know that it runs. They know that we stand behind it, or the manufacturer, or both of us. People have questions, they call me, can you show me a video of something running? Well, the first or second time they might not buy some, but the third time they come back. So all of that's going to go into an equation. It's going to be a new equation in a new reality. And since we're living in a technology world, the equilibrium is going to settle like 4 = 4 on each side. It's going to be a dynamic equilibrium, like you're flying an airplane or you're riding in a ship. You're constantly going to be charting new courses and navigation just to keep in balance. But I think it's exciting.
I agree.
So anybody has questions, anything, please, send them over to us. And the next time we'll have better technology so we can, take you through more things.
We'll look forward to it, Bernie. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for tonight, though. I really do appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.